Have you ever imagined waking up to find that everything you trusted was a big lie? When abandonment turns to a thirst for justice, dark secrets can come to light. Here, every second will count to reveal an even more surprising truth. I worked all these years just to pay for my accomplice. His foolish, moneyed husband mocked his wife and isolated her in a remote spot with nothing but the dress on her body and ran away with his lover. Months later, he finds her in a prestigious hotel and is completely inactive when he notices who accompanied her approaches. And before we start this intense story already, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. This us supports to continue bringing engaging narratives to you. The soft aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the flat as Marcela Prado packed her suitcase with almost surgical precision through the fourth-floor window. Sao Paulo stretched out like an urban desert under the clear morning sky. Her fingers slid through the protection of the professional diving kit, a gift she had won when she received the International Defense Award Navy the previous year. Ironic, a biologist living in a concrete jungle, a light smile appeared on her lips as she noticed Ricardo Vila's family steps approaching her husband of 5 years. Ricardo was celebrated as one of the greatest investors in sustainable projects in Latin America. The perfect match, she said, acting in defense of the seas and he funding ecological initiatives. Already finishing, Marcela wondering, leaning against the doorframe, his finely fitted Italian suit contrasted with the relaxed atmosphere of the room. The private jet leaves in 2 hours, Marcy. She zipped her suitcase, turned to contemplate him that morning. Ricardo was especially showy, as he always was, before big business meetings. I can't believe we're really going to spend 2 weeks in the Maldives. It's been so long since we went out together. You deserve love. After all the effort in the preservation of the corals of the South Atlantic, it's past time to rest a little. Ricardo smiled, but something in his eyes was different, something Marcela couldn't decipher. The route on the jet, it was serene, with Ricardo focused on his laptop almost all the time. Claiming final adjustments in some contracts, Marcela took the opportunity to review her notes on the Maldives reefs. Even when off-duty, her scientific mind did not stop when they finally arrived at the high-end private resort. The sun was already touching the horizon, tinting the sky in shades of pink and orange, reflected in the transparent water. The elevated bungalow on the seaside was exactly as in the photos. It had a ladder, exclusive, that led straight to the sea. Ricardo is perfect, that's it. Marcela was speechless when she saw the table set for the couple on the balcony, lit candles and a cold champagne. I provided something special for our inaugural night. Ricardo wrapped her behind his lips, lightly brushing her neck. How about a dip before dinner? Marcela enthusiastically agreed. While getting ready, she didn't notice that Ricardo made a quick call in a discreet voice. The dive was spectacular. The corals of the Maldives were even more beautiful, personally, than in any study she had ever analyzed. Marcela was so focused on observing a rare species of anemone that it took her a while to notice that Ricardo had risen to the surface when he returned to the bungalow. He found Ricardo ending a call. "Lorena is all right." He stopped suddenly when he saw her turn off. "Who Lorena is?" Marcela asked, removing the gun cylinder. "New executive secretary." Ricardo spoke quickly. "Some pending points of the work." Dinner took place in a strange atmosphere, cut only by the noise of the waves against the pillars of the bungalow. Ricardo kept himself distant, checking his cell phone non-stop. "What happened?" Marcela asked, finally putting down the cutlery. Ricardo looked up from the phone, and for the first time that night he stared at her. His countenance had an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of disdain and pity. In fact, it is the following. He passed the linen napkin over his lips and stood up. "I think the time has come, to be honest, Marcy." Her heart raced. There was something very wrong in his tone. "Tomorrow morning I'll leave on a private boat. Lorena will wait for me in the port." Ricardo spoke in a cold way, You won't have a place on this boat." Marcella felt the air disappear from her lungs. "What you're talking about? I mean, our marriage is over, to tell the truth. It's been a long time, you who were too naive to notice." He laughed with sarcasm while you walked around protecting reefs. "I built an empire Lorena made me. See that I need someone who actually knows business, not a scientific idealist." The phrases hit Marcella like a punch. "How long?" "Years," Ricardo responded without hesitation. "Years, working to support my real partner while you lived your academic dream." He approached, leaning on the table. "Did you really think that I cared about environmental preservation?" "Everything facade, my dear, and extremely facade lucrative." Marcella got up so fast that the chair toppled over. "I mean, then that all the projects, all the investment in conservation, not all the money that seems to be clean is in fact clean." Marcella Ricardo smiled with derision. "But this is beyond your comprehension, right? You were always right in your principles." Tears rolled down Marcella's face, but she stood firm. "Because she brought me here. Why not simply the divorce in São Paulo? Because," here he opened his arms around, "no one will listen to his inconvenient questions. When I leave tomorrow, you will be alone on a private island without communications. Without resources, without anything but what clothes. The time it takes you to get help is the time I need to fix some pending issues." The terror of the situation fell on her. "You planned everything," he confessed, evident. "You think I reached this level, acting on impulse." Ricardo took his cell phone and headed to the bedroom. "Enjoy your last night of comfort. Dear tomorrow inaugurates your new routine if you survive it." Marcella spent the night awake on the balcony, staring at the stars, trying to process how her life collapsed so fast. The man who slept next to her was not the same one she had married, or maybe he was, and she was blind. When she realized, when the sun came up, the boat was already waiting, leaning against the bungalow. Ricardo left the room with a small luggage. "Your things will be sent to your mother's house 1 hour. Then he said, without looking at her and not bothering with her dear diving equipment, "I promise that I will put it to good use for our new operations," were his last words before. Getting on board, Marcella watched the vessel move away, taking 5 years of marriage and all her certainties. She was alone in a luxurious bungalow that would soon be deactivated on a private island, without access to money, documents, or means of contact. What was once paradise became her prison. The scorching Maldivian sun roasted Marcella's skin as she circulated for the 3rd time on the small private island. Her light clothes, suitable for a luxury resort, did not protect her enough from the scorching heat. A day had passed since Ricardo had left, and the resort employees, following instructions, left the place, even taking the groceries and devices of communication. The thirst became unbearable. Marcella knew from her studies that a human body survives a maximum of 3 days without water. The paradise of lush landscape was becoming a death trap. The translucent waters that approached, as beautiful as they were, deceptive, only intensified her anguish, an entire sea of water unfit to drink. At dusk, Marcella noticed something that rekindled her hope. A small, traditional fishing boat of the Donny type was approaching the island. Gathering its last breath, she ran to the beach, waving in desperation. The boat was under the command of Idris Khalil, a middle-aged fisherman from the region next to Samir, his firstborn. Noticing the tourist woman clearly in trouble, they approached carefully. "Help, I'm with nothing," Marcella shouted in English, her voice hoarse from the lack of water. Idris and Samir exchanged looks of apprehension. It was not usual to find a lonely foreigner on private islands, even more so in that state. Even with the language barrier, they spoke little English. The sense of urgency was obvious. Water. Idris held out a canteen that Marcella accepted with trembling hands as she drank cautiously. Trying not to shock her body without dehydrated tears of relief ran through Sirosto, already burned in the sun, through gestures and the few words they knew in English. Marcella communicated that she needed to get out of there. Idris's family, still in doubt, could not leave her abandoned. Idris signaled for her to went up, and they left across to the island of Kendu, where the Khalil family lived. It lasted about 2 hours. Marcella watched the sunset that dyed the sky orange and pink, the same sunset that a few days ago she contemplated with different eyes. The beauty now sounded like a cruel reminder of how everything can change in an instant. When they arrived, they were greeted by Tahira, Idris's wife, a woman with a tender expression and attentive eyes. Their home was simple but cozy. Tahira, noticing Marcella's weakened state, immediately began to prepare a typical meal. With gestures and a few phrases in English, she indicated that Marcella should take a shower and offered her more modest clothes, a long and discreet dress, appropriate to Maldivian customs. The contrast with the resort clothes marked her new reality during dinner, sitting on the floor with the family. Around a simple towel, Marcella tried to explain the situation. Her English, technician of international conferences, became only basic and mimic expressions. Husband left, I left alone. Each word made the notion of what she was experiencing more painful. Tahira, even without understanding the details, she read the suffering on her face after the meal. She accompanied Marcella to a small room at the back, where she had set up a simple bed that first night. Marcella cried silently, not only for the betrayal, but for the disparity between Ricardo's tactical coldness and the instinctive generosity of this fishing family was striking. The following days were a process of adjustment. Marcella quickly grasped that she would have to adapt to a way of life completely different from what she had become accustomed to. There was no air conditioning, only a functional fan when the local power did not go out. The bathroom was simple, with well water, and meals followed local schedules and standards. Tahira taught her to speak a few words indifferent while doing household chores. In return, Marcella sought to be useful by cleaning and learning to cook dishes from the region. Her hands, until then only used to laboratory and diving instruments, now knew fish cleaning knives and rice bowls. After about 7 days, Samir found Marcella crying alone on the beach early in the morning without saying anything, sat nearby and began to repair a fishing net. After a few minutes of complicit silence, he pointed to the coral horizon, spoke briefly, faking a diving movement. Marcella's face lit up with understanding, exchanging animated signs. She clarified that she was a marine biologist. Samir smiled and gestured for her to accompany him to the boat. That first tour to see the reefs was remarkable even without her professional equipment, wearing only a borrowed mask. Marcella felt connected again with her essence under the waters, contemplating corals. Healthy around the island, she discovered a new purpose in the midst of so much chaos. The fishermen, noticing her commitment and preparation for marine life, began to look for her to show parts of the reef that intrigued them through mimics and scribbles in the sand. Marcella was able to teach notions of marine protection. At night, she sat with the Khalil family to look at the stars and think about how her life had changed. The pain of betrayal persisted, but began to share space with something bigger. Perhaps a bigger reason for having been left there on one of those nights. Tahira approached with a notepad and a pen, precious materials on the island, asking Marcella to write her own important story. She spoke in rudimentary English, pointing to Marcella's heart. At that moment, holding the blank pages, Marcella realized that surviving was more than keeping her body alive. It was also finding the strength to transform abandonment into something broader than herself. As the weeks went by, her body got used to the physical routine. The skin, previously protected only by special sunscreen, now it was burning naturally in the equatorial sun. The muscles that only worked in the gym now strengthened in daily tasks. The palate, accustomed to haute cuisine, began to appreciate the simplicity of the local menu, but it was his studies of the reefs that gave him the first sign that there was something big behind one of the diving with Samir. She saw unusual patterns of damage that didn't seem natural. It was something very precise, unlike anything she'd studied in the last 15 years. It was impossible, whispered to herself as she emerged. Noting the accuracy of that destruction, it looked like planned extraction work. Inspecting the reef, Marcella recognized the type of coral. Rare species, newly catalogued by science with pharmaceutical value. His beats accelerated, remembering a project Ricardo had financed in the past. Returning to shore, he found Samir restless. Local fishermen had been reporting vessels of highly equipped divers visiting the area in the middle of the night. It was as if something had been stealthily taken from the reef that night. In the modest room, Tahira surprised with a waterproof box stored among old nets inside the Javier smartphone, damaged but still functional. "We found 6 moons ago," explained Tahira boat. "Large people with high-tech equipment dropped it when the police approached." Marcella joined the two pieces, cell phone and corals extracted with suspicious methods. When turning on the device, collided with the photos, groups of divers carrying out specific removals with state-of-the-art conservation equipment, and the worst photographs of reports with the seal of Ricardo's companies. As they did not file a complaint, Marcella questioned mixing. "English and gestures," Tahira replied. "Someone promised a lot, but never fulfilled. They said, 'Let's help,' but they only destroyed and left. We needed to trust you first in the days that followed." Marcella recorded evidence using the damaged smartphone, systematically photographed the affected areas. Samir guided her to increasingly distant points, revealing the great extent of the damage. In one of these exits, they found equipment with the logo of a subsidiary of Ricardo, an aquatic collection center made to operate for a long time. Digging deeper, they found a wet logbook with Lorena's handwriting. The new assistant wrote down coordinates and codes, but one sentence stood out. "Argus Project Phase 2 in MV confirms advance to the eastern region." That night, when reviewing her notebook, Marcella was sure that she was not facing mere smugglers of rare species. Massim from an international biopiracy network disguised as ecological initiatives. "Nature needs me," murmured in her corner, lit by lamps, "and if my abandonment here were to unmask something huge." Ricardo did not only betray our marriage, he betrayed the conservation of the environment, and she would use all her scientific baggage to reveal the truth. However, it would be risky if her deductions were right. She was not only dealing with smugglers, but with a group capable of bribing governments and eliminating opponents. The Khalil family would be in danger if we need help. Samir said, a morning trusted researcher. Marcella looked up curiously. "Who is?" Called Heitor Martins. Studies corals. He is different from the others. She had never heard of him, but she felt a spark of hope. Heitor Martins landed in Kendu in such a simple way that it surprised Marcella. She was waiting for a researcher loaded with suitcases and scientific utensils. Instead, a lonely man arrived with a battered backpack and a pencil case waterproof. Tall, with very sunburned skin, he seemed to spend more time at sea than on land. "So you are the Brazilian biologist," were the first words staring at her on the beach. "Samir told me about his discoveries. We have a lot to talk about privately." Marcella examined his face, looking for some trace of confidence. "And if you are one of them," Hector showed a tired smile that did not reach the eyes. "I lost my sister to people like that." Larissa was an investigative reporter following an animal trafficking route in Southeast Asia. 2 years ago, she drowned in a suspicious dive. The heavy atmosphere hovered between them. Marcella recognized the genuine pain of Hector. "All right, come, I need to show you something." They went to the rustic warehouse where the Khalil family kept the evidence. Marcella exposed everything damaged: smartphone photographs, notebooks, and the soaked diary. Hector listened carefully, punctuating questions that demonstrated detailed knowledge of the subject is more serious than we imagined. He concluded, by analyzing the pattern you recorded, realized that they are not collection points. Any are tracking. Something. Marcella pulled out her notebook. Yes, I noticed that they focus on specific species, all with remarkable properties of adaptation to drastic changes. Hector fiddled with his tablet taken from a firm cover. I will show you something. In the last 18 months, I have been mapping similar actions in parts of the Indian Ocean. Look at this. A succession of overlapping maps indicated that the reefs attacked in the Maldives were just a slice of something much bigger. They are looking for something unique, Hector continued. Something linked to climate adaptation, but the worst thing is not just the extraction. He paused as if weighing the words. In some areas I found corals that should not live together, but that were genetically manipulated. The realization was terrifying. If someone was in fact altering corals in natural habitat, the consequences could be immense, and I think that it was just a network of dirty money, Marcella commented bitterly. Hector pointed out on the tablet Ricardo's. Companies appear several times, always in a disguised way by subsidiaries. In the following hours, they drew up an action plan. Hector did not work alone. He was part of an international group of activists and researchers dedicated to exposing environmental crimes. From Larissa's death, I was skeptical of the system. Some struggles require direct methods. His presence was providential. Brought more apparatus, advanced a kit of underwater cameras, a network of global contacts who could help publicize the case. That night, while they checked the new material, Hector made a terrifying discovery. Look at this. He pointed to an unusual mark on a block of coral. I have seen something similar in a clandestine research center in Indonesia. They are genetic signatures inserted on purpose as a stamp. Marcella nodded. They are marking the work. This is of an impressive arrogance. Yes, confirm that they think they are. Hector agreed with a serious countenance. The urgency was increasing. It was not only to prove environmental crimes, but to stop an out-of-control genetic experiment. On 2 occasions, they had to interrupt investigations when suspicious boats came close. At another time, they noticed that someone had turned over their equipment, a silent warning that they were watching. Idris and Tahira noticed the risk each other. Samir told us about strange noises at dawn, warned Tahira. With fearful eyes, fishermen from other regions report bizarre phenomena, reefs with luminous corals and extremely agitated fish. It could be the tip of something worse. While Hector reviewed the notes, Marcella felt a shiver. It may be that Ricardo's abandonment here was also a strategy, so that she would not interfere, but now everything pointed to a mega operation. And what was the next step? Asked Samir. We have evidence. We need to go further, Hector said. It is necessary to have access to their internal files. Marcella remembered someone. Lorena, the assistant, may not be who she appears. I feel something telling me that the darkness enveloped the island when a boat pulled up discreetly. Samir identified the passenger. Lorena. Hector's secret message had reached her. Lorena was not only Ricardo's lover, but an undercover Interpol agent for years. The betrayal that tore Marcella apart was part of an operation global bigger. We couldn't risk her reaction had to be genuine, Lorena said, staring at Marcella with a mixture of guilt and firmness. If you knew before Ricardo would realize his real drama, it was vital for him not to suspect. Marcella recalled all her suffering when she was dropped like a rag and understood that there was something bigger at stake. And what she discovered, Hector cut short. Lorena took a waterproof device from the suit. Is worse than anticipated. They are not just messing with Chorus Rara, they intend to manipulate ocean currents on a global scale to sell climate to order. The next few minutes were stunning. In the Khalil warehouse, Lorraine exposed reports and evidence. The scheme was not limited to smuggling or isolated genetic experiments. A faction dubbed Climate Prime, bringing together 12 global tycoons who were eager to profit from the chaos of warming and would use altered corals to regulate regional microclimates for an exorbitant fee. But something got out of control. Lorraine continued. The corrupted corals now affect other species, and internal studies indicate a risk of marine catastrophe if no one stops the expansion. Hector took a deep breath with contained anger. Larissa was investigating this greater crime, so it was not an accident, her death. Lorena shook her head in lamenting as they discovered that she connected the ends. If they did not silence her more, whistleblowers would come. Silence weighed until Hector and Marcella evaluated the material. It is time to expose everything but Ricardo and the others have. Tentacles in politics. We will need to disseminate simultaneously in several countries. Hector, concluded Lorena, kept the pen drive inside the watch. If something happens to me, the file goes to all of you. There will be no doubt about who is responsible. Then she embarked back collecting her badge. We need to stop this consortium at birth. After Lorena disappeared on the horizon, Marcella and Hector plunged into a spiral of work to systematize the evidence filming of the modified reefs. Testimonies of fishermen and secret tokens was plentiful and terrible. Marcella noticed something in the file that made her pale. Hector, look at it. Are not only corals, they test the same technique in tropical forests, altitude mountains, and agricultural systems. It is the total domination of the climate, Hector murmured, surprised. They think they are gods. Tahira appeared serving tea when she put down the tray. She asked with a worried look, "Sea at great risk is not," Marcella confirmed with a wave, "and not. Only the sea, if we don't stop it, they can blackmail the world." Hector began to draw up a project of action. Lorena said that the heads of the consortium will be in Malacapital of the country in 3 days. To make the global partnership official, the opportunity to confront them face to face. We could not ask for a better chance, but we have to be careful. They are powerful. Samir suggested that local fishermen help map the attacked reefs, provide discreet routes, and witness Hector would contact his network of journalists and environmentalists. The scandal would be kept secret until the exact moment the night passed in a tenso frenzy. Marcella felt that every second counted where she had been thrown to Dianau. She would become the base of an offensive against global environmental crimes. The island of Kendu was seething in silence, strategic, when fishermen from neighboring islands arrived at dawn with their stuns discreetly anchored in the adapted community center in HQ. Marcella and Hector guided the gigantic sweep of documentation. Each team must synchronize their clocks, Hector explained, while Samir translated, "We have 36 hours to catalog as much as possible. Before the conference in Malé, any delay could compromise everything." Marcella studied the 3D map of the reef, full of red markings, corresponding to the places of experiments that made clear the evil plan of the tycoons, an underwater neural network placed to maximize the influence on the sea currents. The best divers will stay in the deepest stretches warned, pointing out the areas on the map we need samples of the corals altered, but total care. Lorena warned that some organisms can be toxic. Idris, respected leader among fishermen, translated the concern seriously. Very agent depends on the sea. If something goes wrong, we all lost part of our lives in the afternoon. Hector graced the staff with instructions on how to use special equipment, high-resolution underwater cameras and sensors to detect genetic signatures, he remembers. We have to appear ordinary fishermen, a misstep, and we activated the distrust of dangerous people at night. Marcella and Hector had to refine the plan. A research vessel of the consortium approached prematurely. "They arrived earlier," exclaimed Hector, confused. "They should not investigate this area. Now we will have to run," Marcella informed Samir and Idris. And the start of the operations was given. The boats left secretly at night. Under the water divers did the thorough investigation. Marcella and Hector led the main team, located more deformed corals and submerged mechanical structures, confirming the terrifying scheme in the areas monitored by other groups. Reports appeared in profusion extraction devices and shoals with unusual movement. It was a race against the clock. 16 hours later, Marcella and Hayter emerged exhausted, but with overwhelming evidence, including images from an underwater monitoring station full of instruments displaying data in real time. It is their control center, Hayter warned. They cannot deny the existence of this laboratory. When everything comes to light, they collected everything and returned to Idris's house, where they processed the material and went up to secure servers that Hector had. If something fails in Malé, the world will know. Summarized Hayter Tahira prepared food, but the nervousness was enormous. Everyone knew they were about to confront forces far above any ordinary fisherman. With the sun rising, they had a complete dossier, explicit evidence of large-scale genetic manipulation, alteration of ecosystems, and illegal installations on the coast. It is time to go to Malé Haytor, declared, "The fate of the planet depends on what we do." There, Malé, the capital, appeared on the horizon as an urban wall of gleaming buildings from the deck of the boat. Marcella felt a mixture of excitement and fear. After 4 months living so simply, the city seemed like another world. The International Biotechnology Congress would start in a few hours. Hector checked the safe device, Lorena, assured that everyone from the prime climate will be there. Marcella adjusted the veil that was part of her disguise as an Arab researcher. She practiced an accent for weeks in an intense way. Helped by a friend of Hector, and the backup asks Marcella, looking discreetly at the movement of the port. "Everything ready. We have more than 20 reporters in 10 countries ready to publish at the same time. And 4 environmental agencies are already waiting for the data if they are confirmed at the Sunrise Hotel." Strategically chosen for being discreet, they set up base in separate rooms. Hector and Marcella reviewed the presentation, which would pretend to be just a study on coral migration, but which would include evidence unmasking the consortium. Ricardo must realize sooner or later, Haytor, he watched cautiously, but perhaps we can count on his ego. Ricardo liked to flaunt and deny any threat. The next morning, the convention center was buzzing. Scientists, businessmen, and the press from all over the world were present for news in the marine area. Marcella, in disguise, watched Ricardo from afar. He supervised the preparations of the main stage, with the air of a supreme magnate next to him. Lorena acted as a solicitor's secretary, but adjusted hidden recording devices. Dr. Fatima Hassan, someone he called her using the pseudonym Marcella, the presenter of the event, said there was a change. His lecture was brought forward to the morning personal request of Dr. Villa. Marcella's heart raced. Ricardo had noticed his summary. Exactly as she and Hector had predicted, he would not resist an exhibition that seemed to confirm his innovations. "This changes our scheme," whispered Hector in his disguised communicator. "Let us know." The teams around the next few hours were tense. Marcella saw other speakers addressing advances in marine biotechnology without imagining that they were providing clues to what it would soon show. Ricardo made the speech of honor, arrogant and eloquent, presented himself as a visionary and philanthropist, sustaining environmental preservations. Everything was part of a great staging and now finished. Ricardo, I invite Dr. Fatima Hassan, whose research on natural adaptations of corals from the Indian Ocean combines perfectly with our work. Marcella took the stage, feeling a weight huge inside the folder. Was the file that, when plugged into the central system, would display evidence to the entire public. Thank you. Started in Arabic, migrating to impeccable English studies. Coral adaptation standards. But I found something much further. The first slide displayed a simple map, but showed the points where the consortium had worked on the reefs. Ricardo watched, interested, in the first row. Lorena, next to him, stared at the exits where Interpol agents were discreetly positioned. We noticed intriguing mutations. Marcella continued, changes that do not follow a normal evolutionary process. Suddenly, she noticed a slight tremor in Ricardo's countenance. He was beginning to recognize her. Despite the characterization, the way she spoke, the gestures, these genetic variations, she proceeded, returning to the Brazilian accent. They are not nature, they are deliberate actions. Ricardo leaned in his chair, staring at her coldly. It was the moment when Marcella said, "And now I will show you how these interventions are executed," fitted the device to the media input. The screens flashed and then nothing had happened. Ricardo gave a cynical smile, lifting from the armchair, a small controller in the impressive hand. "Really, dear?" But he should have remained on that island. The auditorium fell silent immediately. Ricardo addressed the audience, sorry for the technical failure and also the boldness of this intruder. But before he took back the reins, the lights of the place oscillated and the screens returned to activity. Lorena's voice echoed through the speakers. "I don't think so. Ricardo should have checked who installed the backup system." The projections now displayed shocking images, adulterated corals, confidential documents, recordings of conspiratorial meetings of prime weather. Everything simultaneous. Ricardo turned pale. Seeing his plots exposed in front of hundreds of witnesses, "This is inconceivable," he murmured, clicking desperately on the remote control. The system was isolated. "You taught me a lot," Ricardo said Marcella, removing the veil and making clear her own identity, about always having a backup plan. Or would it be about using people and discarding them when they are no longer useful? The place plunged into turmoil. Reporters filmed in real time. Scholars stood up, pointing to the data, confirming that the tampering was true. Ricardo ran to the phone, but Lorena was more agile. "Looking for this?" she asked, showing the device. "The self-destruct routines have already been cancelled while talking." Interpol agents took control of the doors. Hector coordinated everything via his transmitter. Now there is no way to hide every crime they committed. Ricardo looked around, angry and cornered, but tried one last appeal. "You don't understand. We did it for science, for advancement, who never dreamed of controlling the weather. To mitigate droughts and storms is something noble," Marcella replied, "cold for progress. I will show the result of your progress." New images of deformed fish corals shining in an unnatural way and ecosystems collapsing. "This is the real effect. Your manipulation is getting out of control. It is not just corals. The entire ocean set is on the verge of imbalance." A researcher from the audience stood up. "We fear that this lack of control will reach the entire Indian Ocean in 5 years if nothing is interrupted, and worse," Hector added, showing the scheme of currents expanding globally, the consequences. Another member of the consortium stood up, talking on the phone in Mandarin in Protocol 0, and hung up. Hector and Marcella exchanged alarmed glances. Lorinash frantically on the tablet. "Something happens. All laboratories register abnormal variations. One last trump card." Hector muttered. "They can unleash total chaos if they don't have control at the same instant." The monitors showed readings in real time. The adulterated corals pulsed, releasing thermal waves that affected all marine ecosystem. Ricardo, spotting the screens, sketched a 6-smile. "Welcome to what I call the supreme power. You will not be able to stop this reaction. The fight is not over," Hector informed, while agents they shouted instructions. Lorena tried to deactivate remotely, but it didn't work. And now Idris, Tahira and Samir arrived with Marcella and Hector with distressed faces. "We will help if the sea dies. We die too," Marcel interviewed his own records in search of a failure in protocol. 0 remembered that corals still obey the natural cycles of the moon. "Hector, you studied how the tides synchronize coral adhesion. If we can use this cycle, we can induce an interruption of the signal." Lorena Hector mobilized teams. At the critical points, local fishermen provided boats to position specific areas with noise emission devices. "The high tide occurs in 30 minutes, Lorena shouted, analyzing data. "We can align low-frequency pulses." With the apex of the tide to nullify the effect, the auditorium turned into a bunker of international operation. Several governments and environmental agencies were running in tune in order to help. Heiter announced, "We are in sync. Activate in 3, 2, 1. Marcella activated the panel and a set of sonic signals was launched over the waters, combining with the force of the tides. At first, nothing changed. But then the readings began to decrease. The luminescence decreased. The temperatures returned to normal. The scattered shoals recovered. Typical patterns were interrupted. Lorena celebrated. The submerged laboratories are under control. The consortium is finished. Ricardo released the remote control with contempt. You don't know that you messed with something bigger than the world. Can Marcella kept calm, bigger than you for sure, and never had the right to think he owned the planet. The sun rose at the end of the chaos. Agents took Ricardo and the accomplices of the prime climate under the accusation of environmental crimes, global conspiracy, and even attempted murder. You will not escape, repeated Ricardo. But no one listened to the decision to intervene in the Maldives had saved an entire ecosystem, and perhaps the future of the planet. Half a year has passed since the victory against the consortium. The island of Kendu witnessed the construction of a new research institute. Marcella looked at the sea from the balcony of the site, now transformed into an advanced laboratory. Hector entered with recent reports. 95% of the adulterated corals returned to their original shape, and the other 5%, Marcella questioned, still exhibiting mutations but seemed to have settled into a new balance. Is nature finding its way on its own? International condemnation. Lorena now led a task force against global environmental crimes. But the later discovery was even more surprising. Digging through old archives detected signs that nature had been evolving climate adaptations without human interference, and the consortium only artificially accelerated an ancestral process. Samir entered with a small glass reliquary containing a fragment of coral, still with a soft glow. Hector called Marcella. See another specimen, Ophir variation natural. It seems that the story is much bigger than we imagined. Tahira, who was also helping, explained our ancestors already spoke of corals that changed the environment. Maybe it was hidden science. Marcella smiled, recognizing how science and ancestral wisdom can come together. Not everything can be. Forced nature follows its rhythm with or without us. That night, there was a celebration on the beach community, and scientists together. Samir became a young researcher. Idris and Tahira celebrated the opportunities for the region. Marcella and Heiter watched the sunset hand in hand. In recent months had strengthened their bonds, built on trust and respect. The waves in the surf began to exhibit a soft glow, typical of healthy reefs. It was the dance of the tides. Tahira commented, "It happens only when ancient corals want to remember that everything is part of a gigantic web." Marcella contemplated the spectacle with teary eyes. A year ago, I was just a biologist thinking I had everything planned. Now I learned that there are greater truths when we accept that we know little, Hector agreed. And now what comes next? We continue researching, protecting, and more importantly, listening to what the sea has to tell us. And so in the clear ocean of the Maldives, a new chapter emerged, not of domination and arrogance, but of respect and harmony. A lesson that the true learning is in cooperating with nature, not in using it for selfish purposes. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable discoveries appear when we simply dance to the rhythm that nature itself shows us.